Hello, welcome back to Which is the Moon. Thanks for watching. I'm Eva Maria, your Sunday co-host, along with Natalie, and this week we've been talking about tarot cards versus oracle cards. I think honestly, it all comes down to a matter of preference. I think which method one will choose to use, whether it be tarot or oracle cards, really comes down to whichever you find works best for you. But I will say that if you find you're weaker skill-wise in one or the other, maybe you should consider trying to improve your skills in whichever of the two you're not as good at. And the reason that I suggest that is that I think doing so, trying to improve your weakness, trying to turn it into strength, is something that can potentially well-round you. And I think this is true for any sort of weakness, anything you're not as good at in your craft or in your, pursuit of, your practice. I think that if you try to develop your weaknesses, if you try to cultivate those into strengths, you will develop many more strengths. Now, as far as I am concerned, I personally prefer tarot. I won't say that oracle cards don't work for me. That isn't true. I just happen to prefer using tarot. I think the oracles can be effective. I find that the wealth and depth of symbolism in the tarot, it sort of resonates with me. And as a reader, I tend to scry into the imagery, and not all oracles necessarily have as much of a wealth of imagery. So that is my personal preference. But again, I think whichever you use, tarot or oracle, really comes down to what resonates better with you, what you find works better for you. I will say I recommend intuitively reading, as a lot of our other hosts and co-hosts have said in their videos. I believe that book meanings can give you generalized, roundabout sort of answers that may potentially be somewhat accurate, but I find in my experience that if you can come to trust your instincts, your impressions, however those psychic intuitions, those impressions happen to come to you, whether it's clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant, whatever, if you can trust those, I think the answers that you will receive in doing readings, I think that they will be a lot more accurate, because that's what I found in my own practice as I have over the years developed my skills as a tarot reader. I will say I don't believe that you have to be gifted a deck, as many feel. I don't believe that myself. I believe that you can absolutely buy a deck for yourself, and I think it's actually maybe better if you do choose your own deck. And the reason why I'll say this is because I feel that you probably, in my opinion, should love the deck that you're going to be reading with. If you don't like the imagery that you're looking at, I feel you won't feel as, you won't have as much of a connection with the cards, in my opinion. I find that that's true for me anyway. So I prefer, honestly, to buy decks that I find the imagery to be beautiful. I like to look at them. I choose decks that really speak to me, if you will. Also, I don't believe that others can't touch your cards. I haven't had any problem with others handling my cards. I don't feel personally that it somehow taints their energy. They're a tool. They're nothing more than a tool. You dedicate your cards, of course. I think you should, not just to, reading and not just to being as accurate as they can be, but you also sort of, your tool is yours, no matter who touches your tools. If someone touches your tools, it does not taint them, in my opinion. I have not found any problem with that. I like sometimes when I read for people, when it's an in-person reading, I like to allow the person I'm reading for to shuffle the cards. I feel that maybe their handling of the deck kind of creates a connection. It puts a little bit of their energy sort of into the cards in the sense of, how can I explain it? It connects them to a point where when I am reading the cards for them, there's some connection there, you know. It's not necessary. I mean, I've read for people all the way across the US or even in other countries that I've never even met, and I've had very good results. I don't feel that people have to handle your cards, but I don't think that if they do, that it'll have some kind of adverse effect. That's just my opinion. I do believe, though, that you should have some sort of a bond. You should cultivate a bond with your deck, whether it's a tarot deck or whether it's an oracle deck. As I said before, I think you should love to look at your deck. You should really be fond of it. You should really want to work with it. If it's a deck where the images are just kind of like, I don't feel that you'll connect as easily with the deck. It's sort of like, your deck is sort of like a friend. You're going to want to, just like you wouldn't want to hang out with someone you didn't like, you'd probably not want to read as much, or maybe you'd have difficulties, I think, reading with a deck that you don't like to look at as much, or just don't like something about. So I think that, you know, that's one factor to consider. But okay, let's say you have a deck that you absolutely love. Well, how do you bond with it? I feel that carrying it with you helps to develop a bond. I've even slept with my tarot cards under my pillow. You know, I have practiced with them a lot. The more I feel that you use your cards, the greater of a bond you will develop with your cards. And again, that goes tarot decks or oracle decks. I think that goes either way. The more that you use them, you know, and of course I think you should cleanse and dedicate them when you bring them home, because, you know, things do kind of develop, you know, they pick up energies where they're made, where they're sold, whatever, you know, so you may want to, like, you know, cleanse them off and then dedicate them to the purpose of being a divining tool, and, you know, practice with them, let them be around you a lot. You will develop more of a bond. Another thing that I will say is that as a reader, I have many decks, and the reason why I have several, and there's not like there has to be a certain number, but the reason that I personally have several is that sometimes I find myself that when I read over and over and over and over and over with the same deck, I get a sort of stale feeling after a while from the cards. I do cleanse them out, but I will usually switch decks when I start to feel that stale feeling coming on. And I think it's just the cards want to rest for a little bit, if that makes sense. So I will switch to another deck and I will use them until they kind of start to feel like, and then I'll let them have a rest, you know, and again, I'll cleanse them as well. And it helps to keep, I think it helps to keep my, how can I explain it? What's the word I'm looking for? It's not that it helps to keep me sharp per se, but it keeps things fresh to rotate my decks, I think. Not just for the deck, but it also, I think, gives me, in a sense, a rest from the imagery that is inherent in one deck, and I can move along to freshly, you know, read with another of my decks that has been resting for a while, a deck that maybe I haven't used for a while. This is just something I personally find. I don't know if other readers, you know, or practitioners have found that to be true for them, but that's just something I happen to find. And so I'm mentioning it here because if you come upon that feeling one day and you're like, wow, these cards feel really stale, like what the hell, and you cleanse them out and they still feel stale, maybe the deck just needs a little bit of a rest. Maybe you've been reading too much with it. Maybe, you know, you might want to have like 2 or 3 decks or however many, you know, few that you love that you can kind of rotate between, give them sometimes a rest period. And, you know, maybe even keep like some crystals that are programmed to sort of help to recharge your decks, you know, in a sense, to revive them, to empower them while they're not in use, maybe. Not that I feel that they lose power necessarily, but I feel that it might be helpful to sort of keep them in the game, even though they're not necessarily always in use. What else did I want to say? In order to become a better reader, it's obvious that practice is necessary. I think something that you might want to consider doing if you're trying to become a better reader, if you're very new to it, whether it's with oracle cards or tarot cards, is maybe regularly trade readings with others who are also trying to develop their skills. And don't like charge each other money, just, just for the sake of practicing your skills, develop your skills, just trade readings and then give each other feedback on, honest feedback, not like, you don't have to be mean about it if they weren't accurate for whatever reason, or if they were a little off, but, let them know, okay, this point here made a lot of sense. Here, I don't think you made so much of a connection, but, do be honest. And I think it's important to do that because that will help not just you to develop, but the person that you're swapping a reading with. It will help them to develop as well. And a final note I think I want to make before I wrap up this video, because I don't want to make this like a super long, crazy, rambly video, because I think everyone else this week has pretty much said a lot of valid, valuable, things, and I think the topic has probably been covered sort of well. I mean, I've, seen some of the videos, but I just know that as a whole, we here at Witches of the Moon, we tend to be, as a whole, very thorough in covering topics for the most part. So my final point that I want to make is that you can create your own oracle card decks, just as you can, if you really wanted to, if you really were up to the task, you can create your own tarot cards as well, though that may take some time because, you really want to develop your, imagery for the cards, and you have to kind of like draw them or create them or photograph them or whatever, and it takes dedication. It's probably a longer process if you're doing this from scratch and just making purely your own deck. But you can create an oracle deck. There's pretty much the sky's the limit how you want to structure your oracle deck. My advice would be just try to balance your cards maybe between potential positive or negative outcomes, or just try to kind of offer a wide array of possible results. So anyhow, these were just some of my thoughts, some of my suggestions, some of my feelings on tarot versus oracle. I hope that I brought something contributory to the discussion. If you have any thoughts, feelings, questions, anything, please feel free to put them in the comment box. And until our next exchange, blessed be and Ashe.